Welcome to Criminalist Behavior Podcast, the podcast that takes you deep into the heart of Louisiana's history and current, most chilling true crime stories. I'll be guiding you through the darkness of these crimes and all of those involved. Each week, we dig deep on those forgotten crimes or those crimes currently happening within the underlying legends that continue to haunt us. So lean in, listen, and get ready, because true crime is anything but ordinary. Stay with me as we unravel what happened in these mysteries. Today we're on episode number 44, and we're on another serial killer. He was operating in the Baton Rouge area, and he's none other than Derrick Todd Lee. If this is your first time listening, hi, my name is Sarah Studier, and I'm your host of Criminalist Behavior Podcast. I want to thank you for listening to the show, and I really hope you enjoy it. So, trigger warning, because we got to have that out there, because this was like really fucking sick and gruesome. This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against children, adults, and animals. Listener discretion is advised. So, we're just going to jump right on in, y'all. So, Derrick Todd Lee was born on November 5th, 1968. He was raised in St. Francisville, Louisiana, in a small town which was just right north of Baton Rouge. And mental illnesses ran in Derrick's family, as his father suffered from bipolar disorder and psychosis. So Derrick Todd Lee was primarily raised by his mother, and he actually grew up with 13 siblings and half-siblings. 13. This is in the 60s, so yeah, that's what people did. They didn't have TV. They just shit out a lot of kids. But Derrick Todd Lee did poorly in school, and he was actually enrolled in special education classes. He dropped out in 11th grade, and tests would reveal that Derrick Todd Lee actually had an IQ of 65. So this actually classified Derrick Todd Lee as being mentally challenged. He was put in special education classes, but these classes actually became a result of bullying for Derrick. His classmates and peers would actually bully him because he was actually in these special education classes. And these people would call him the R word, which would be retarded, which is very fucking cruel, because we don't use that word. Mentally disabled is what he was. He had a learning disability. At age 13, on November 8th, 1981 to be exact, Derrick Todd Lee was arrested for burglarizing and vandalizing a candy store. And on that very same day, he actually assaulted a woman in front of his mom. 3 years later, on August 8th, he was arrested on suspicion of murdering a civilian, but he was later then released. So, age 16, he was suspected to killing someone, right? Derrick Todd Lee set his car on fire in order to collect the insurance money, and this scheme failed, because on July 2nd, 1998, he was arrested for attempting to rob another civilian, but the charges were reduced. Then he actually got out of jail. So he's getting away with some shit, right? Setting his own car on fire, trying to collect insurance money, possibly a murder suspect at age 16. And now he actually attempts to rob another person, and then got a slap on the wrist. And so Derrick Todd Lee hardly fit the typical loner profile of a serial killer. So he was described as a loner, and he actually gained his reputation in his neighborhood as a peeping Tom. And he was arrested multiple times throughout his life for voyeurism, stalking, and burglary. In 1988, Derrick Todd Lee married Jacqueline Denise Sims, and they actually had 2 children together. Derrick Todd Lee also had a longtime girlfriend. Her name was Cassandra Green, and he was in and out of living with Cassandra. In 2000, Derrick Todd Lee was convicted from running from 2 officers after attacking Cassandra Green at a lounge, aka barroom. And he was actually sentenced to 2 years in prison for that attack on Cassandra. Derrick Todd Lee worked blue-collar jobs, including a pipe fitter, a concrete finisher. And friends and neighbors described Derrick as friendly, and he was just a person and a womanizer despite being married. He also had a darker side. In 1992, Connie Warner went missing in her home in Zachary, Louisiana. Weeks later, the 41-year-old's badly decomposed body was found nude in a local drainage ditch. Connie, a 41-year-old accountant, is believed to be Derrick Todd Lee's first victim. After disappearing from her home, her body was found about a week later near a lake. Any evidence that could lead to her attacker had been washed away by Hurricane Andrew. And Hurricane Andrew actually hit Baton Rouge on August 26 of 1992. And Connie was actually severely beaten, and her cause of death was listed as a skull fracture. So Andre Burgess, which was a former boyfriend of Connie Warner, Connie Warner's daughter, actually, she stated, hold up, stop, let me start over. I just got twisted, my throat is just dry. Let me take a sip of my coffee right quick because, oh my God, my throat is dry. Okay, all better. So, basically, what's being said is, Derrick attacked Cassandra at a barroom. And he was actually known to be a womanizer, regardless of being married, and he actually had a darker side. Connie Warner went missing from her home in Zachary, Louisiana at age 41. Her badly decomposed body was found naked in a drainage ditch, and Connie's teenage daughter's former boyfriend, Andre, said that there was no evidence tying Derrick Todd Lee to the crime. But they believe in their hearts that he killed Connie. They just couldn't prove it. And this also was the same opinion as the Zachary Police Department Chief, David McDavid, because he believed that Derrick Todd Lee was the killer of Connie, but they just didn't have enough evidence to prove it. So Derrick Todd Lee was considered a suspect in another occasion in assault on a young couple in Zachary graveyard. This happened in 1993. The couple was alone in their car when they were attacked by a man with a machete, nearly severing one of their feet. Years later, the survivor of that said attack, Michelle Chapman, picked Derrick Todd Lee out of a police photo lineup. But by then, the statute of limitations actually expired for that particular crime. In 1998, Randy McBrewer was born. 1998, another crime happened, and this was with Randy McBrewer. Randy was born on March 18, 1970 in Brooklyn, Kings County, New York. Randy was a single mom and was employed as a home health nurse. And she was last seen at a local video store near her home in Zachary, Louisiana on April 18, 1998. Her and her young son returned to their residence at Saul Avenue, Oak Shadows, at approximately 7 p.m. that night. And Randy had never been seen again. The neighbor found Randy's son, who was 4 years old at that time, outside by himself, and he was just playing. And the 4-year-old told the neighbor that his mother was lost. Now, Randy's car was parked at her house when a neighbor first notified the police on that following day, April 19, 1998. That something actually must have happened to the woman. She wouldn't allow her 4-year-old son to be out there by himself playing. Nor to say that the child said that his mom was lost. So Randy disappeared from her home in Zachary on April 18, 1998, and is presumed dead. Her son was not injured during this altercation, and it's said that she was actually abducted on April 19th from her Oak Shadows subdivision home in Zachary, Louisiana. Police Detective David McDavid was playing in a softball tournament in New Iberia when he got the call about Randy's disappearance and likely murder. So one of just 3 detectives in a small department, McDavid made that 100-mile drive back to Zachary in just over an hour. At the scene, this is where he learned that Randy had been snatched from her home while her son, Michael, slept in his bed just a few feet down the hall. Inside the house, police found the hallway streaked with blood. Someone had attacked Randy in her bedroom, then dragged her down the hall and in the kitchen. On the floor of the hallway, detectives found Randy's contact lenses. They were side by side, just inches apart. She was hit hard enough, face down, to knock her contacts out. Now, contacts, I can't even imagine being hit so hard that contacts fly out my eyes. It's just this poor, poor woman. So, the day a patrol officer at the time assisted McDavid with the crime scene, and there it stated that there were drops of blood. Oh man, I'm getting tongue-tied. There was drops of blood that were spattered from the kitchen to the car part. And this one police officer that was working with McDavid stated that it looked like she was picked up and carried. So beyond the car part, this is where all traces of 28-year-old Randy McBrewer ended. In the kitchen, Detective McDavid found a bouquet of fresh flowers stuffed inside of a garbage can, a pink trash bag lined garbage can. Outside in the car part, Detective found a roll of pink plastic garbage bags, which was stuck to the outside of the roll was a drop of blood and a trace of semen. So on this roll of pink trash bags they found a drop of blood and a trace of semen. How did they know semen? I guess, I don't know. They just figured it. I don't fucking know. That's weird. But Randy Brewer's house was in Zachary subdivision, Oak Shadows. The house sat within splitting distance of one of where Connie Warner used to live. In 1992, 6 years before Randy disappeared, 41-year-old Connie was vanished from her home. 11 days later, that's when that truck driver discovered her body lying in a ditch near the state capitol building. After examining the crime scene at McBrewer's house, Detective McDavid was pretty sure that the murder of Connie Warner and the disappearance of Randy were connected. The investigators stated there were signs of a bloody struggle. Her body has never been found, but Zachary police in 2004 stated that all the evidence was secured at the crime scene was tested, and the results indicated that Derrick Todd Lee's DNA was present. So the physical description of Randy is white, female, 5'2", between 115 and 130 pounds. She had brown hair and brown eyes, and she had a heart tattoo on her left breast, and she wore blue contacts, and her ears were pierced. Any information on Randy McBrewer, people are asked to contact the Zachary Police Department at 225-654-1912. The case number for Randy is 9804-2403, and her name is case number is 4164. So if you have any information in leading to the disappearance of Randy McBrewer, you're asked to contact the Zachary Police Department. And she was very full of life, very beautiful, and her poor son, age 4, just crazy. So, just like all the crime scenes, so we got Connie Warner and we got Randy McBrewer. Now we get into Chapman crime scene. All of these victims had something missing from their crime scene. And that one thing that was missing from the crime scenes were their keys, which led investigators to believe that the killer was taking keys from his victims and using them for his souvenirs. Because with any case, we do know that most killers take something to remember their crime, which is considered as a souvenir. So in 1999, Derrick Todd Lee was actually arrested on peeping Tom charges when he was accused of stalking a woman at an apartment complex. He also had an aggravated assault arrest in 2000 for beating his then girlfriend with his fist. And in 2001, Gina Wilson Green, on September 24th, 2001 to be exact, 40-year-old Gina Wilson Green was found murdered in her home on Stanford Avenue near LSU in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. An autopsy report indicated that Gina Wilson Green was raped and then strangled, so her hyoid bone was broke. The 41-year-old nurse was found strangled to death in her Stanford Avenue home the very next day. Initially, police suspected that her ex-husband was the suspect, but they actually quickly eliminated him as a suspect. And Gina Wilson Green loved life, and she loved helping people. And that is a great career for her, to become a nurse. Gina Green's family has stayed out of the media spotlight, and her ex-husband, who was initially questioned by police and then ultimately cleared, talks to media outlets about this whole ordeal. And he described Gina as being outgoing, vivacious, strong, and opinionated, very full of life. And he was married to Gina for almost a decade. Even though Gina Green and Mark decided to call it quits, they actually remained very close friends. It was no surprise that when she began to feel a little nervous while living at her Stanford Avenue home, she actually told Mark about that. And Mark stated in an interview the following: "She had mentioned to both me and her mother the preceding week of an uneasy feeling that she thought someone was watching her. But Mark says Gina didn't know what was making her feel uneasy at that time. This is when the next week she was actually strangled." So Mark describes his first thought as, "We had a run-in with a painter where they were actually in court the week prior, and the gentleman had made some threats against both of them." That was his first thought. But that painter was checked out, and he actually ruled them out as a suspect. Although police say Gina's alarm was not activated at the time she was attacked, it was there because she mentioned it to Mark previously. And Gina was always said to be extremely careful, almost to the point where she was paranoid about turning her alarm on. And Mark stated that she was actually excessive and very compulsive about turning her alarm on. Mark also stated that Gina had a pepper spray in nearly all the windows. And although they never had any children, Gina loved her nieces and her car. So that's what Gina was surrounding all her love with. He says Gina's baby was her love for her BMW and her niece. Mark says he'll always love Gina and remember her as a small town girl who lived big. It would not be until the following summer when authorities would link DNA from the murder of Charlotte Murray Pace to Gina Green's killer. Around the time of Green's murder, 23-year-old Pace lived 3 doors down. Police said her cell phone and purse were missing, and the cell phone was found 3 weeks later in an alley on Choctaw Street. DNA evidence was taken from the crime scene and was analyzed at the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab. Police linked her death to the serial killer Derrick Todd Lee in July 2002 before Lee was actually identified as the suspect. Just evidence collected at the crime scene matched the same as all the other murder scenes. So in 2002, on January 14th to be exact, Geraldine DeSoto was found by her then husband, Darren DeSoto. His wife was only 21 years old, and she was lying in a pool of blood in her Baton Rouge home and Aldi's. Darren DeSoto left Aldi's trailer around 7 a.m. on January 14, 2002, and drove to work. Geraldine DeSoto, Darren's wife, and the victim, Geraldine DeSoto, Darren's wife, and the victim in the instant matter, contracted an employment company about a position listed on a company's website. So Geraldine was trying to get another job, and she contacted this particular agency about a position that was located on their website. Geraldine was a Louisiana State University student, and she planned to attend graduate school in the fall of 2002. She wanted to work and save money to pay for her future tuition. But between 9 and 10 a.m., someone from that agency contacted Geraldine and scheduled a job interview that was going to be for 2:30 p.m. that very day. So Darren went to work at 7, and Geraldine was contacted between 9 and 10 for an interview that's the very same day at 2:30 p.m. So Geraldine drove to LSU to pay the tuition for a class she was taking during the spring semester. While there, she met and talked with another student. Around 11 a.m., she left to return home, and at 11:41 a.m., Geraldine sent an email to one of her professors. At 11:50, 9 minutes after that email was sent to professors, a telephone call was placed from the telephone in Darren and Geraldine's trailer to a phone located at the Exxon refinery in Baton Rouge. The call lasted less than a minute, and that afternoon, Geraldine failed to appear for her job interview. And like I said, that job interview was at 2:30 p.m. So 11:50 was the last time anyone heard from Geraldine. The employment agency called Geraldine's home, but there was no answer. Darren, Geraldine's husband, left his job about 6:15 p.m. He was concerned because he had called his wife multiple times throughout the day, and she never answered him. He arrived home about 7 o'clock that night and found that the trailer door was actually open slightly. At first, he did not believe his wife was home. But when he looked down the hall, this is when he made a gruesome discovery. He discovered Geraldine lying on her side in a pool of blood. He touched his wife's body and found that it was cold. He also saw that Geraldine's throat had been cut. He ran to the home of a nearby neighbor who called the police immediately. Geraldine DeSoto was pronounced dead on scene. Now, Darren DeSoto, Geraldine's husband, was the lead suspect in her murder before all the evidence actually led to Derrick Todd Lee. The evidence found at the DeSoto murder scene had been sent to the state police crime lab, but the results came back to be inconclusive. It would be more than a year and a half before authorities would have a conclusive match to the suspect. And Reliagene Technologies, a private DNA lab in New Orleans, was able to actually draw DNA samples from Geraldine DeSoto's fingernail scrapings. West Baton Rouge Sheriff Mike Kazes says the reason it took so long to get a match in the DeSoto murder is because State Police Crime Lab could not conduct the new kind of DNA test needed to gather the evidence for the suspect. However, Geraldine DeSoto's family long suspected that she was a victim of Derrick Todd Lee, the serial killer terrorizing Louisiana. And Geraldine's family participated in serial killer rallies that were held monthly at that state capitol. Excuse me. In an interview back in November of 2002, Geraldine DeSoto's aunt told 9 News about the similarities between the murders of her niece and an LSU grad assistant, Charlotte Murray Hayes. And she said she was told the following: if she would have been able to walk into the scene of the Pace murder, it would have been looking like the same very murder of Geraldine. It's that similar. During Derrick Lee's trial and sentencing, Geraldine DeSoto's parents had a chance to address Lee. And so they did. So Geraldine's mother stated the following in her addressment to Derrick Todd Lee: "Why, Geraldine, why does God let such evil to exist in the world? You took the life of a child that had just begun. She has so much to give. You took away our opportunity to watch her grow. You will be sentenced to life in prison. That is man's judgment. What will you do when it comes to God's judgment?" And during closing arguments, prosecutor Tony Clayton showed the jury graphic autopsy pictures of Geraldine's brutally beaten body. One of the photos shows that Geraldine's visibly clenched fists, and it's clear indication she put up a fight, and in doing so, captured DNA evidence of Derrick Todd Lee underneath her fingernails. And Tony Clayton made reference to it, stated, the following. Open quotations. She's been screaming out all this week. I've got the killer in the palm of my hands. And prosecutor Tony Clayton left the jury with the following. At the close of your deliberations, when you get on the elevator and go home, don't leave room for him. Derrick Todd Lee needs to be put in a cage. Derrick Todd Lee's defense attorney, Tommy Thompson, said the following. Are we going to try this case on emotion and media hype? Hell, then let's drag him out now and hang him under a tree. But we don't live in a country like that. That is his very own attorney saying that, right? I get his sarcasticness, but like, what? So May 23rd, Christine Moore, who aged 23, was found. Wait. Scratch that. So, May 23rd, Christine Moore, age 23, was found 24 days after she'd been murdered. She was killed by blunt force trauma, and nothing's really more known about Christine Moore other than her body being found, and rule of death was blunt force trauma. But Charlotte Murray Pace was found at her apartment in Baton Rouge on Charlotte Avenue, home south of LSU, by her roommate. Autopsy reports stated that on May 31st, 2002, Charlotte Murray Pace was stabbed over 80 times. She was then raped. She also received other defensive injuries, showing she tried to fight off her attacker. Charlotte Murray Pace had recently graduated from LSU as one of the youngest students to receive an MBA degree in business administration. Police said on July 9, 2002, another victim was succumbed. Diane Alexander was attacked at her home in Brobridge. Alexander later told police that a black male knocked on her door asking to use her phone. Diane Alexander said when the man found out her husband was not home, he overpowered her and attempted to rape her. Investigators said that the man beat her and tried to strangle her with a telephone cord. But before Derrick Todd Lee could strangle Diane Alexander's son arrived home during the time of the attack and found his mother on the floor lying in blood. She survived the attack and after 5 days was able to help police develop a composite sketch of her attacker. She survived because her son walked into the home during the commission of the crime. Derrick Todd Lee left out the back of the house. And Diane Alexander's son actually chased Lee, and he was able to get a description of the car that Derrick Todd Lee was driving. Diane Alexander had details as to what Lee looked like, and then on May 22nd, 2003, Alexander was able to describe Derrick Todd Lee to a police sketch artist, where they then released a police sketch. And oh my god, it's fucking identical. A warrant was issued on May 27, 2003 for Derrick Todd Lee in the case of Diane Alexander. Y'all bear with me. My throat is dry and I gotta take a sip. So Pam Keena Moore, on July 12, 2002, 44-year-old, was kidnapped from her home, beaten, and raped. Police said her husband arrived at their Briarwood Place home and found spots of blood on a bedroom rug. There was furniture that was disheveled, and his wife was missing. There were no signs of forced entry into the home, and investigators stated that 3 days later, a survey crew actually found Pam Keena Moore's body just south of Whiskey Bay exit on I-10. Now, Pam had defensive injuries as well as cuts to her neck. DNA that was taken from her body actually matched the attacker who murdered Green and Pace. So, Pam Keena Moore owned Comforts and Joy's Antique Shop in Denham Springs. So, Pam was actually doing well in life. And I mean, I love me some antiques, so baby, I would have been at your shop. So Pam was murdered, y'all, and she clearly put up a fight, but she was succumbed, and her body was found, like I said, just south of Whiskey Bay exit on I-10 with defensive injuries as well as cuts to her neck. So the next murder was Trenisha Danae Collum. She was 23 years old, and she was kidnapped from her Lafayette home on November 21st, 2002. Investigators stated that her car, purse, and keys were found in Grand Coteau near the cemetery where her mother was buried just 7 months earlier. So, Trenisha's mom died 7 months prior to her being kidnapped. Police state that a hunter actually found Trenisha's body 3 days later in the woods near Scott, Louisiana. Autopsy reports show that Trenisha Danae Collum died from blunt force trauma to her head. Now we're going to go to December 25th, where a woman disappeared and was never ever found alive again, or unalive for that matter. And this would be none other than Mary Ann Fowler. And with the assistance of the DA, there was a computerized composite drawing of Diane's attacker, and Detective Boyd testified that when they placed that sketch to a picture of Derrick Todd Lee, that it actually resembled the defendant greatly. Detective Boyd had a meeting with the serial killer task force, and a decision was made to release the drawing to the public. As a result, law enforcement officers received tips that led to the eventual arrest of Derrick Todd Lee of Geraldine DeSoto. And there was a qualified expert in the field of forensic DNA analysis that testified at the prior hearing, and this was from Carolyn Booker. She performed DNA testing at the Acadiana Crime Lab, and she testified that Diane Alexander's dress was negative for semen, but it had stains containing DNA. Booker indicated that the defendant, Derrick Todd Lee, DNA was of an African American, but it could not exclude the contributor of the DNA, but that 99% of African American population would be excluded. So at trial, Carolyn Booker acknowledged that Diane Alexander's husband also could not be excluded as a minor contributor of the DNA found on her dress. So, in case you got lost in that jumbo shit, the DNA test that was performed by Carolyn at Acadiana Crime Lab was negative for semen, and the DNA indicated that an African American could not be excluded as a contributor to the DNA, but that 99% of African American population would be excluded. Make it make sense. But Carolyn Booker also conducted analysis of DNA from a vaginal swab of Ms. Collum. And the profile of the sperm cells from the swab matched Derrick Todd Lee's known profile. She concluded that reasonable scientific certainty that the defendant was the source of the male DNA and the sperm taken from Ms. Collum's body. She testified that the probability of selecting a random individual with the same profile would be 1 in 30 trillion. So, boo, Derrick Todd Lee, is it? Gina Panetta was a qualified expert in molecular biology and forensic DNA analysis, and she also testified at the hearing and at trial. She was employed by Reliagene Lab, a private lab that performed the YSTR testing on fingernail clippings and vaginal swab from Geraldine DeSoto, and also from Ms. Collum. And this type of testing could not be done at the state crime lab. Gina Panetta explained that there are 2 types of DNA. The YSTR test is conducted for DNA that is only on the male Y chromosome. Thus, the test attempts to find male DNA and was performed on her fingernail scrapings from Geraldine DeSoto. This was done because the sample was taken from Geraldine DeSoto's fingernails, and that actual sample was poor quality, and it was overwhelmed with female DNA. The DNA extracted from Geraldine DeSoto's fingernail scrapings indicated a male contributor and revealed that the defendant was potential contributor of the DNA, while excluding 99.8% of the African American populations as popular donors. So, long story short, Miss Pineda was breaking down the DNA sequence and all of this with the YSTR TOS chromosome, and she determined by using random data in 1,605 different individuals of African American descent. She acknowledged that on cross-examination when the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab tested the DNA found on Geraldine DeSoto, a male chromosome was not detected. She further testified that there was more than one male donor of DNA found under Geraldine DeSoto's fingernails, and that Geraldine DeSoto's husband could not be excluded as a minor donor. So there was multiple DNA underneath Geraldine's fingernails, which is crazy. So Miss Pineda admitted that the paternal relatives of the defendant could not be excluded as potential donors of the DNA sample taken from Geraldine DeSoto. She explained that the YSTRs are inherited straight from the father. So a man will have the same YSTR profile as his father, brother, and any individuals related through the paternal line. The state argued that in order to counter the possibility that a male relative of the defendant actually perpetrated the crime, the YSTR profile derived from the DNA sample taken from Geraldine DeSoto was compared to and found to be consistent with the YSTR testing performed on a DNA sample from the column case, whereas the defendant was established with reasonable scientific certainty as the perpetrator. So they led that DNA to Derrick Todd Lee. And the probability of selecting a random individual out of that particular population was 1 in 30 trillion. The match of male DNA profiles from the Colum and DeSoto cases exclude the possibility of male relatives of the defendant as possible perpetrators of Geraldine DeSoto's crime. In addition to the evidence from Diane Alexander and Colum's cases, there were other acts that the state sought to introduce as incidents that occurred February 19, 1997, July 31st, 1997, and August 19, 1999. Zachary Police Department Sergeant Roderick Ennis testified at the hearing and at trial that on February 19, 1997, at about 9 p.m., he was patrolling Oak Shadow subdivision when he saw the defendant, Derrick Todd Lee. And Sergeant Roderick, who lived in the subdivision, knew that the defendant did not live there. He stopped him and asked him for his identification. This is when Derrick Todd Lee stated he left it in his vehicle, which had been broken down. Derrick Todd Lee indicated that he was going to his girlfriend's house to use the telephone, but did not know the girlfriend's name or where she lived. Upon frisking the defendant, this is when Sergeant Roderick found a knife in his front pocket. He noted that Derrick Todd Lee was wearing brown, Western-type boots with a thick heel and had a pair of work gloves. When Sergeant Roderick dropped the defendant off at his vehicle, he noticed that it was a new truck and started immediately when the defendant turned on the ignition. Sergeant Roderick testified that he did not arrest Derrick Todd Lee that night and that it was because he did not commit a crime, but because there had been a rash of Peeping Tom reports in the area, and because Connie Warner and Randy Muber had lived in that subdivision, he actually prepared a report of this encounter. And Zachary Police Department Lieutenant David McDavid testified at the hearing that on July 31st, 1997, he investigated 2 Peeping Tom complaints in Oak Shadow subdivision in Zachary. And this is when Derrick Todd Lee was arrested in the area for those incidents. And Lieutenant McDavid later learned that Derrick Todd Lee had been seen in the same area in February of that year. So this is when Derrick Todd Lee was subsequently convicted of the Peeping Tom offenses. So now we go to August 19th, 1999. St. Francisville Police Department Officer Archie Lee took statements from 3 women who lived in St. Francisville Square apartments. and each identified Derrick Todd Lee's picture in a photographic lineup. One of the women, Colette Walker Dyer, indicated that the defendant had entered her apartment on 2 occasions without her consent. The defendant was arrested later that day and pled guilty to peeping Tom offenses. At trial, Colette gave a more detailed description of her encounters with Derrick Todd Lee. During one of the incidents, this is when Derrick Todd Lee walked up as she was unlocking her apartment door and walked with her into her apartment. He got himself something to drink, sat down, and proceeded to question her, repeatedly asking her to go out with him. He also stated that he could rape her if he wanted. He only left when she walked out of the apartment, and he followed her. After that hearing, the trial court ruled it would allow the following other acts evidence to be introduced at trial: the murder of Colum, the attempted rape and attempted murder of Diane Alexander, the February 19th, 1997 stop of Derrick Todd Lee while in Warner and McBrewer's subdivision, including discovery of a knife on his person, the July 31st, 1997 arrest in the same subdivision, discovery of acts of peeping Tom, and the 1999 incidents when Derrick Todd Lee approached a St. Francisville Square apartment resident and a few days later was seen again at that same apartment complex and was convicted of the peeping Tom offenses. The trial judge concluded that each of the crimes or acts had been proven by clear and convincing evidence and could be used at trial to show knowledge, plan, and preparation, and that the probative value of the evidence outweighed the prejudicial effect. So, Derrick Todd Lee sought review of all the court rulings of that trial, and he actually served a writ, but the court denied the writ. The Supreme Court denied the writ seeking review. So, Sterling Colum Jr., which is the brother of Danae Colum, stated the following: "Ever since Danae got killed, this is what we wanted. It didn't matter what case went on trial first. We've all become a big family. This is a victory for all families. This is what we wanted." And Sterling Lacombe, father of Danae Colum, stated the following: "Seeing somebody else's family member being cut up like that, it was very disturbing. So now I know what I have to get myself up for in days. Today, he got life. For Danae, I want the death penalty." And for the Boer family, Lynn Mariano, the mother of Pam Kennemore, stated, "I'm thrilled. Most of all, I'm happy. This has been horrible for them to have to sit and watch through all the photographs of their daughters during this trial. And they had the evidence as it was well presented, and they did an outstanding job." That's what Pam Kennemore stated, that the investigators did upon her daughter. And Marino complimented Derrick Todd Lee's behavior in court as a smooth talker. He talked his way in and out of everything his whole life. And even his attitude in court, like I said before, he laughed. He didn't take it seriously. And now, who laughs last has the best laugh. And Marino stated, "I want to see if he's going to be laughing on his way to Angola." So, y'all, we're at 43 minutes already, and I'm going to give you one more of his cases, and then I am going to cut it off, and then we'll get into the profile and the trial hearings on the next episode. So this is going to be a two-part. So let me get finished. So, 2003, Carrie Lynn Yoder, March 3rd, was kidnapped from her LSU apartment between 6 p.m. and 12 a.m. She was 26 years old at the time, and 10 days later after she was kidnapped, her body was found in Whiskey Bay near where Pam Kennemore's body was found. And police believe that her body was thrown from a nearby bridge. Baton Rouge police said that Carrie Lynn Yoder was beaten, raped, and strangled to death. Baton Rouge police said DNA evidence recovered during the autopsy was analyzed at the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab, and it actually matched the DNA profile of the murderers of Green, Pace, Kennemore, and Colum. And Carrie Lynn Yoder was a biological science graduate student at LSU. Police named her as a serial killer victim after they linked it through the DNA evidence. Derrick Todd Lee was forced to submit a sample on May 5th for DNA testing. The test results matched Derrick Todd Lee's DNA 3 weeks later to a genetic profile of the serial killer. And on March 26, 2003, an arrest warrant was issued for Derrick Todd Lee for the first-degree murder of Carrie Lynn Yoder. So, y'all, I'm going to get into the FBI profile right quick on how the FBI profiled Derrick Todd Lee in the beginning. And then we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to get back on the second episode, part 2, on whenever he was actually finally arrested and how it all took place. So, FBI's profile of Derrick Todd Lee. The initial profile given about the Baton Rouge murder suggested that the perpetrator was an white male between the ages of 25 and 35 who lives with others. He would act out in anger and be very controlling, and is also unable to handle rejection and prone to retaliate. And based on the killer's ability to carry a body over rough terrain, he is physically strong, and he possibly works in a job that requires strength and doesn't involve interaction with the public in any way. And they also stated that he sees himself attractive to women. He, in actuality, is socially awkward around them. His social economic status is average, is below or average, with the finances being tight. So basically, penny pincher. He spends time watching women and develops information about his victims. He doesn't just follow them from a distance, and he will make at least one attempt at interaction in which he is viewed as harmless. The killer gets a thrill from taking the risk, and his impulsive behavior suggests that he might have been arrested before for minor offenses in the past that involve stalking and home intrusions. He is determined, mission-oriented, and cool under pressure. He follows the investigation through the news and could talk about his victims and make comments about the investigation upon being arrested. He is anxious over being apprehended, but is also confident that an event of such won't happen. Bro, that FBI profile nailed Derrick Todd Lee to the fucking wall. Like, this is Derrick Todd Lee all in one. Because he was between the ages of 25 and 35. However, they stated white male. This man was not white, clearly. In case you don't know who Derrick Todd Lee was, he was an African American. But, I mean, this describes Derrick Todd Lee to the fullest without the whole white male persona. So, y'all, this is the case of Derrick Todd Lee, part 1. And we're going to continue next week with this case. So until then, if you enjoy the show, please rate and review us on our Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, anywhere you get your podcasts. And be sure to come back next week for part 2 of Derrick Todd Lee. And until then, this is your host, Sarah C.A. And don't forget to like, follow, share, subscribe, rate, and review us, y'all, please. And reach out to us if you want, because we love to hear from our fans. I am really grateful and honored to be doing this. So thank y'all, and I really hope y'all enjoy y'all day. Bye.